education and training systems ignore the age-old belief that knowledge can never only be given, it must also be taken.
So in the Ramayana, what people don't realize, the first part of the Ramayana is the education of Ram. It's called the Balkand, the child, when he's a child. And we're told that after, when he grows up, he's sent to the ashram of a rishi called Vasishtha, where he's trained in the various royal arts, the martial arts. He learns a lot of things. And then after his education, he comes back to the palace as a prince, fully ready, having read everything that Vasishtha had to teach him. And then suddenly one day, there is another rishi who walks in, and his name is Vishwamitra. And Vishwamitra walks in and he says, you know, I have a problem in the forest and I want Ram to come and solve it. And Dashrath says, but Ram is very young. I will give you my army. Use the army to solve the problem. And Vishwamitra insists that Ram come with him, because he says, who is going to be king? Who is going to rule? Who has to solve the problems? It is Ram, right? So let him come with me. And he literally drags this young man from the zone of comfort, where his father wants to keep him in a very safe place, to the zone of discomfort, from the palace into the forest. And the first challenge that Ram faces in his life is of a Rakshashi, a demoness, attacking him, called Tataka. And Ram says that, you know, it's a woman, and I've been told that you should not harm a woman. Stri Hatya is a great sin, it's a pap.
That's what he's been taught all along.
He's been taught all along.
Right.
And Vishwamitra says, it doesn't matter whether it is a man or a woman. Look at the situation, look at the context, see what the problem is. And right now, the problem is this lady, and you have to kill her. So he raises his weapons and kills Tataka.
Quite against all his training, which is don't raise, you know, no violence against
no violence
women.
And it's, in a way, it's almost, it's a talk, one can look at it as equality, where when you're looking at a situation, don't get bogged down by theoretical rules and conduct. Just look at the situation, find the problem, and take the decision that you have to take. And it's a ruthless one. So Ram has to shoot. The first act he does is he's told by his teacher, shoot Tataka, and he kills Tataka. But the story doesn't end there. Then he goes on a journey, and it's an interesting journey where with Vishwamitra. And Vishwamitra takes him to another spot. And at that point, he comes across a stone, and he's told the stone is one of Ahalya. She has had an extramarital affair, and then Vishwamitra looks at Ram and says,
so she's been, turned into a stone because she had an extramarital affair. That's her punishment.
It's a punishment. And he says, liberate her from this punishment. Liberate her, touch her with your feet, and she will break free from the stone, the cursed life that she's leading. Liberate her, uddhar karo uska. So what you have is an extreme, two extreme situation. On one side, you have Tataka, who has to be killed. So it's an act of ruthlessness.
And on
the other side, it's of upliftment, of liberation.
Of compassion as well.
Of compassion, of extreme compassion. So you move from being ruthless to being compassionate. And these are the two extreme decision-making behaviors that a king has to demonstrate. Sometimes he has to be ruthless, and sometimes he has to be compassionate. And a wise king knows what to do when. And this is a shift from the theoretical background that he was in, from Vasishtha to Vishwamitra. And Vishwamitra, as if you read the scriptures, was once a king. So he knows the practical problems Ram will face when he's to live in society. And in a way, he's imparting knowledge that this is what you're going to do. There will be times when you'll have to be ruthless, and there will be times you have to be compassionate. And when you know when to be ruthless and when to be compassionate, you will be a great king.
Okay, so to deviate a little bit from the broader theme of education and training and development, how do you know when to be compassionate and when to be ruthless? I mean, does the story narrate why Vishwamitra suggested that in the first case, Ram kill the woman, and in the second case, be compassionate and liberate her from her punishment?
See, there is no, there's no such kind of a toolkit or a template, you know. We will basically,
I'm just curious to know why.
You know,
why, ruthlessness on one end and compassion on the other?
You see, here at one place, in one side, you're saying that if I don't take that decision, then the forest will be destroyed. The community will be destroyed. So it is violence happening at one side, and the only way to stop it is by being ruthless over it, because there seems to be no other method to handle that. On the other side, it is that if you let it go, then there is no hope for people. That means if someone has made a mistake in their life, it means that you'll never forgive them. Imagine living in a society where there's no forgiveness. So on one side there is almost brutal punishment. On the other side there's forgiveness. And so there's always hope being given. But not only hope.
Got
If
it.
there was only hope, then I can get away with everything. So there is a balance of the two. So there is what is called dandaniti, the stick, and the other side is, well, not quite the carrot, but
I get what you mean. It's almost the carrot in terms of hope. That there is forgiveness
there
if
is
you do
forgiveness.
commit mistakes,
You-
right?
Because yes, there is punishment, but it's not forever.
Okay. I'm curious, why did Vishwamitra not take these decisions himself and insist that Ram has to do this, himself, as opposed to Vishwamitra, who you pointed out was also a king at one time, could have easily killed Tataka and easily released Ahalya, right?
Yes. You see, but the point, it's it's an interesting point, because you see, Vishwamitra has stopped being king. Now he's moved to the next stage of his life. He's moved to a stage where he wants to go to the next level, which means that all his royal pursuits has to be managed by someone else. So in a way, it's passing on. It's passing on the baton to the next generation.
Okay.
You see, it's the next generation now has to take care of the world. He can't be there all the time. So it's about the older generation saying that, okay, we have done what we had to do. We learned, we made mistakes, we have figured out things. Now we're passing it on to the next generation. The next generation will now be capable. So one can call it, it's a capability building exercise. So that then Vishwamitra can move on.
So for every Ram, you have to have a
Vishwamitra,
Vishwamitra,
absolutely.
otherwise Ram would not have existed.
Absolutely.
From a corporate or an organization or an enterprise perspective, that is almost the one most important thing
Yes.
that enterprises are constantly working to achieve, that the people who are currently in positions of power
Yes.
train and impart their knowledge and their understanding to those who are likely to then become their successors, so
Yes.
to speak. And that exchange of information, knowledge, experience is not almost always perfect, right?
If you say the purpose of an organization is growth,
Right.
the growth being the primary word, and how do I grow? Now, normally growth is seen purely in economic terms, in terms of growth of Lakshmi. So my salary has to increase, my the top line, bottom line at a company level, at an individual level, my salary, my perks, my remuneration has to increase. But let's take another currency which also exists in India. Lakshmi is not the only currency. The other currency is Saraswati, knowledge.
Right.
So every person who walks into an organization is suddenly exposed to a whole load of knowledge as he does his work. Now he says, I want to go to the next level. What is going to the next level mean? When you look at it from a mythological perspective, we are saying that, you know what, the role that I'm performing, I have done the best I can, I have lived it. Now I want to take up a new role. In a way, I have to shed the old role and take up a new role. So in a way, the old role, the shedding of the old role can be equated with death. So when you die in India, you cross a river called the Vaitarani.
Right.
So when I'm saying, you know what, I've been a good executive, so I die as an executive so that I can be reborn as a manager. But why should I be allowed to move on to the other shore unless I have created a replacement for myself? Because otherwise you're indispensable. The word uses pitrarin, it's an obligation.
Okay.
Just as you were made an executive by someone else, you shall make someone else an executive before moving on to the next role as manager. So if you look at an organizational hierarchy, it's really one generation after another generation, and each generation is obliged to the previous generation and to the next generation. So there is a telescoping of ambitions across generations, which one is trying to achieve. And this is how the ashrama system came into being. In ancient India, they said that, okay, you're going to live for 100 years. And they said, let's divide your life into 4 phases. And the first phase is when you're a student.
Right.
The next stage, you're a householder. Third phase, you are retired. And the fourth phase, you're a renunciant.
Right.
You're a sannyasi. Now, look at it metaphorically. What it says in the first phase, you gain Saraswati. In the next phase, you use the knowledge of Saraswati that you've got to gain Lakshmi. Now, having done the householder's life, what do you mean by retirement? Because that's 25 years, because it's divided into 4 equal phases. What do you do actually in the retirement? It's not actually, retirement doesn't walking away from everything. It means passing on the Saraswati that you have gained to the next generation. And only then, renunciation is moving to whatever you want to do.
Right.
So it's kind of a cyclical process which is happening. So in this stage, retirement stage, I'm talking to the previous generation, preparing them. And so one generation is growing. So I give Saraswati and move on to the next level. So who grows? The new trainee is growing. And so am I growing, because I can go on now to take the next position. And so there is like a perfect wave that is happening, where Saraswati is being given, Saraswati is being taken. Saraswati is being given, and so is Lakshmi being generated. So there is growth at an intellectual level as well as at an economic level. And that is what organizations should aspire for. I mean, the whole idea of creating a separate training department is absurd. Because who has the knowledge? The person in the field has the knowledge, not the person, someone sitting in the classroom. Coaching is intrinsic to growth. And that's what the Vishwamitra story in a way says, that he has been a king, he has been a great king called Kaushika. Vishwamitra, friend of the world. That's the meaning of the name. So he's saying that, I will pass on whatever I have learned to this young, promising prince called Ram, and then move on.
But not all of us can be Vishwamitras. You call this a perfect wave, but the thing about corporate power or power in the workplace is that the more you know, the more power you have, the more indispensable you are, or the less dispensable you are.
Yes.
And therefore the incentive to pass this on to successive generations and empower them as well is very, very low, right? Because then it makes me less important.
Yes, absolutely. See, the whole idea is we think knowledge is power.
Right.
So I don't want to give it. The reason I give it away is because in the process of giving it away, I learn many more things.
Okay.
So it's the Saraswati is this wonderful, unlike Lakshmi. If I have 1 rupee coin and I have to give, and you have 1 rupee coin, and we exchange one rupee coin, both of us are still left with 1 rupee coin. But if I have an idea and you have an idea and we exchange 2 ideas, we both have 2 ideas. So the wonderful thing about Saraswati is that
It doubles.
It doubles.
Right.
So if I want to increase my understanding of Saraswati, the best way to improve my understanding of any subject is to teach. Because also what happens is, in the process I figure out human dynamics. We figure out, why does a person not want to study? Because it's so obvious, right? This is the way you negotiate. And you'll realize that the person in front of you is not learning. The teacher, by observing the student and his resistance to learning, figures out human dynamics. He understands why a person, nobody's obliged to learn, how difficult it is to learn. And so you have to work very hard to make the subject attractive.
So it is incumbent upon the teacher to sort of find ways to help the student learn, as much as it is incumbent on the student to find ways to learn.
Let me
right?
rephrase this slightly. What I'll say is that in the process of giving Saraswati, I figure out the art of becoming attractive.
Okay.
Because I focus on creating the honey, and the students will come like bees. The focus is on creating the honey and not in attracting the bees. The bees will come. Now, that is the growth that I get when I'm passing on my knowledge to the other. So you gain and I gain. You gain some knowledge, you get the data, but I get the wisdom. I always notice something, whenever the school bell rings, have you seen how, what is the first thing that you hear when the school bell rings?
A great amount of cheer, joy, and children running out. Right?
Yeah, children running out, because it's almost like, it's the cry of the domesticated beast. He's been tied and fettered in the classroom, and suddenly he's being liberated. So he wants you to run away from school. This is the education system we have created. So even a training program in a corporate world, you're dying for the lunch break and the coffee break, because you just can't keep your eyes open, because you are being pushed into this this space where they are going to domesticate you using various methods, like 9:30 to 10:30 you learn this, and 10:30 and as if your brain is going to sort of get it. What is attention is not given to the simple fact that, is the student motivated willingly to enter the school? No. So he has to be pushed in, broken inside, and it's almost violent, the process of education and training. Now let's look at a different method. Let's look at the Indian method of training, and the Vikram and Vetal story, which is a folk tale, explains this in a very powerful way. Now, Vikramaditya was a great king, and one day a sorcerer came to him and said, go to a cremation ground and find me a Vetal, a ghost. And Vikramaditya said, of course, whatever you want I shall give, because being a great king, he was willing to give anything to anybody who came to him. So he goes to the crematorium to find the ghost, and the instruction is that when there is a banyan tree and the ghost hangs upside down, and you have to pull it down and carry it on your shoulders, but never speak to it. If you open your mouth and speak to the ghost will fly away.
And then you'll have to go back and
you have to go back and collect him.
Okay.
Now, so he goes to the crematorium, finds the ghost hanging upside down, pulls him down, puts him on his shoulder, walks back. Now the ghost doesn't want to be caught. So the ghost tries everything in his power to make Vikramaditya speak. He chats him up, asks him questions, and Vikramaditya refuses to speak. Finally, the Vetal comes up with an idea. He says, let me tell you a story. And at the end of the story, I'll ask you a question. If you know the answer to the question, speak. If you know the answer to the question and do not speak, your head will burst into 1,000 pieces. But if you don't know the answer, keep quiet. It's perfectly fine. You know, this is what we call the case study method.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Harvard Business School has put it to use for many, many years now, very successfully, right?
Yeah. So, I guess it is validated once it happens in Harvard.
All right. Ouch. Okay.
So, the Vetal keeps asking questions, and Vikramaditya, being a very wise king, is able to answer all the questions. So for 24 times the stories are told, 24 times the questions are asked, and 24 times the answer is given, and the Vetal flies back, much to the exasperation of Vikramaditya.
Who has to go back and recollect him and then go through the whole process of storytelling. And
again and again.
Right.
It's a cyclical, boring thing. You know, it's like that sales cycle every month and the business plan cycle every month. Horrible, you know, you want a liberation from that, don't you?
Right.
And then finally the 25th time, Vikramaditya is unable to answer the question.
He genuinely doesn't know the answer,
answer,
because if he knew it, his head would have burst into 1,000 pieces.
And so he heaves a sigh of relief. He says, there, now I have got the ghost and I'll take him back to the sorcerer. And the ghost laughs, you know, the typical Hindi film laughs. And he says, what a foolish man you are. Do you realize every time you answered the question, you were saving your own life? So long as you can answer the question, you were saving your life. The fact that you can't answer the question means now you are in trouble. Because you see, the moment you'll take me to the sorcerer is going to bottle me and turn me into a genie, and I'll be the very powerful genie. And what is the first thing I will be asked to do?
Is to kill you as the king.
Is to kill you.
Right.
And so all the time when you were problem solving and you were getting irritated by that, you didn't realize that that is the only reason you are king. You exist to answer questions. You only matter when you solve problems. So you should welcome problems rather than saying, oh, I don't want problems in life. Because then what is the use of a king?
It's a beautiful metaphor, because the day the problems go away, your utility as a king reduces to nothing, right?
Nothing. But you see, the smashana bhumi, or the cremation ground where the ghost exists, is the training room. No business happens over there. Nothing happens. So it's a cremation ground. And the trainer or the facilitator or the guru, whoever you want to call it, is the Vetal. He has nothing to gain by the training. He's paid for it anyway, whether it's a good training or bad training. Who gains from the training session? It's the participants. So it's the Vikramaditya who has to come to the Smashana Bhumi. The Vetal won't come to Vikramaditya. So in ancient India, the teachers never went to the students. You didn't have advertisements for colleges and schools.
Right.
If you want to study, come. If you don't want to study, don't come. Who loses? There's this Chinese proverb, like you keep hearing this all the time. You keep hearing you know, don't give a man a fish.
Teach him how to fish.
Teach him how to fish. The Indian method would be very different. They would say, no, don't give a man a fish. Don't teach him how to fish either. But inspire him to discover his own method of fishing. Because then it's his. That's the teacher's job. And in inspiring the student, he grows himself. This is Saraswati Dan.
Next week on Business Sutra.
Some things cannot be measured. Let me tell you the danger of the story of what happens when you try to measure everything. Well, the story is of a father who asks his daughters, how much do you love me? And the eldest daughter says, I love you as much as sugar. And the youngest daughter says, I love you as much as salt. And in the father's mind, sugar had a higher score. And so he said, the elder daughter loves me more and the younger daughter does not love me enough. And therefore he rejects the younger daughter. And yet from a younger daughter's perspective, she was trying to say how much she loved him. Because you cannot eat anything unless it contains salt.